What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with our Thursday night football stream, going over what to expect between the Browns and the Steelers. Going to break down any injuries, which this week, or at least for this game, there's not that much to speak on, but a weather report to go through, a little bit of rain going through the Cleveland area as we speak. And then want to touch on the strategy side, right? A lot of the ownership numbers have changed throughout the week. You have a better idea of what to expect from a game script as we've had more time to think through all the possibilities. So this stream is your time. Of course, if you have any questions at any point, do not be shy at all to go ahead and throw them down in chat. And even if you're watching this on replay beforehand, feel free to go ahead and skip around, get to the section of the video that you find most helpful. We're essentially going to go over all of the weather stuff, all of the top end game script, game total, spread, all that sort of fun stuff at the beginning, and then talk through the player poll player by player. So that'll be the format. Let's get this started. I'll share my screen. We'll bring up the weather. We have Robert down there in chat. What's going on? He's calling for Kenny Pickett already, which I love. I've been doing so for about 2 or 3 months at this point. I hate Mitch Trubisky, probably my least favorite player in the NFL, and I'm saying that as a Steelers fan. But yeah, Kenny Pickett, I don't think it's going to happen tonight, but I do think this will be another example of why they should get to Kenny Pickett. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you said Kenny P for all the money. You could play him in like 5 to 10% of lineups as like a just in case 0.5, maybe 1% owned sort of player there. But I'm not sure if he's going to get in. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I would love him to play Robert, but I do think it's a little bit of a pipe dream. Let's talk through the weather, which it's not going to be a massive factor, but as of right now, it is raining quite a bit. They are having showers, and for the next about hour and a half, they have around a 49% chance of rain. At game time, it clears up. There's a 0% chance the whole way from 8 until 11 to 12 p.m. when they'll be finishing the round. That's something that'll be important to notice is that they have 22 to 40 miles an hour of wind. If you go down here to 9, it's 22 to 35. And even at 11 p.m. when they're finishing up, it's still 19 to 31 miles an hour of wind. Now, if we were playing golf DFS, that would be absolute havoc. I mean, it would be a huge part of our analysis here. And the thing I want to notice, or at least point out here, is that when you're kicking into the wind, it's going to be extremely difficult to go out there and make kicks. When you're throwing downfield, particularly into the wind, you're going to have a hard time efficiently completing the ball 20, maybe even 25 yards downfield. Even with, both quarterbacks, Brissett and Trubisky, it's not like Brissett has a weak arm. They're just not elite level arm talents, right? So those sort of players may have a little bit of trouble when they're playing into the wind. Downwind kicking, I don't want to say it's easier, but obviously you're going to have plenty of leg to get it there. Passing downwind can be a little bit tricky, but I'd much rather be passing downwind. It could have an effect on the game, but not nearly as much if it was like sleeting, if it was out there extremely slippery, like we saw for that Bills-Patriots game last year, where you not only had the really windy conditions, it's like they were playing right now, right? There's showers in the area. It feels like it's 50 degrees. That's something else. The air is going to be relatively cool, so the ball isn't going to travel nearly as far, which again, for golf would be absolute havoc, right? We'd have to incorporate that. But I think just in general, maybe a few more checkoffs, a few more of those 5-yard outs, 10-yard outs from both teams, rather than deep post routes, go routes, that sort of thing, like you might see in a perfect weather or dome sort of game. Heading over to the game script, the over-under has held pretty much pat. It was 38.5 at the beginning of the week. It's 38 now. The spread has also stayed pat at 4.5. So they're favoring the Browns here, 4.5 points. I said that I thought it makes sense. I do think that the Steelers are live to win this game, but in terms of like an average score, I have to say that I align with Vegas, and that's despite being a Steelers fan. In terms of the injuries, you do have a suspended KZ on the Steelers side, so he won't be going out there. Jadeveon Clowney, maybe the biggest headline going into this. Obviously, you have the rivalry there, but then you have Jadeveon Clowney who's going to be out. So one of the 2 elite pass rushers on that Cleveland Browns team are not going to be out there, which might help Mitch Trubisky a little bit. But again, you still have those 20 to 40 mile an hour winds, which are going to cause a little bit of trouble. And then Jesse James, who is playing against his old team, is on injured reserve, so he's not going to be in there. Let's head over to the player poll now, start talking through some of these players, see if there's any comments down in chat we need to catch up on. So let me go ahead and do that first. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger for you. There we go too. Nick says, thoughts on playing both kickers? I know it's windy, but I don't like either defense or low-priced options. I think it's viable. I wouldn't play him at captain, but if you're going to put both of them at the flex spot, I think it's doable, particularly if you're playing 20, 50 plus lineups. I'm playing a 150 max. I'm playing a 20 max contest tonight. In my 20 max, probably not going to play both kickers together, but for my 150 max sort of entry, my MME, definitely something I'll consider and more than likely will get to, because at my first run, what I did around like 2, 3 p.m. this evening, which not much has changed since then. So, it's probably going to look like my final run. I ran about 35 to 40% of each kicker. So I'm with you there. I like both kickers. Running them together is okay. Maybe a little suboptimal. For those large field GPPs, crazy stuff happens. Let's start at the top, though. So for our walkthrough here, again, if you have any questions, like Nick had there, feel free to go ahead and comment them down below. But Nick Chubb and Najee Harris are huge talking points. This weather is going to push people even more so onto them. At the beginning of the week, everyone was talking about how the Cleveland offense was just running all over people. Even in the loss to the Jets, they had well over 150 yards. In the first game, they had over 200 yards rushing between Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, multiple touchdowns for Hunt. Just both of them have been extremely productive, both on the field and from the fantasy perspective. Najee Harris, on the other hand, has not been all that productive. So despite that, he is still $9,800. So projecting for just 13.7 points. In terms of points per dollar, both of the players up top are equally overpriced, because you can see, Nick Chubb, despite projecting almost a whole 4 points higher, is also over $2,000 more expensive. So you're getting what you're paying for up top. They're going to have by far the highest floors of any player on the slate, because both will see action out of the backfield as a wide receiver. Nick Chubb should see 15 to 20 carries. I imagine Najee Harris probably right around 15 carries. Harris might get a little bit more action out of the backfield as a wide receiver, because I expect them to play from behind more often than not. So even in a Browns heavy stack where I'm taking a Nick Chubb, mixing in 2, 3 other of the middle tier or elite level options from the Browns, I might consider trying to take a Najee Harris, punt down low, fit in an extra stud into that lineup, because even in a blowout or a game from when Pittsburgh is playing from a touchdown, maybe 10, 13 points from behind, they're still going to throw the ball a lot to them. So I like them there at $9,800. I also like Nick Chubb. Both of them are equally acceptable at the captain slot. I would just only do so in a stack, right? So if I'm taking Nick Chubb at captain, it's got to be a Browns heavy lineup. If I'm taking Najee Harris at the captain slot, it's got to be a Steelers heavy lineup. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to set up a role in my optimizer where if I'm taking either of those players at captain, I'm going to force in at least 2 of, let's say, the top 4 or 5 price players from each team, right? So it's going to be at least a 3-on-3 stack. So maybe it's not a full-on 4-2 stack. By setting that role, you're going to get plenty of those to begin with, but at the very least, it'll be a 3-on-3 stack. I think you want to go that direction, right? Because in order for these players to get to, let's say, that 20 to 25 point performance, which even in a low scoring game is what we're looking for at the captain slot, particularly up here at like $12,000 and $9,800. You got to get them, in a positive game script to get the sort of run that they're looking for. Amari Cooper, I think because of the wind, may actually be a beneficiary. So in general, I think the passing attack and Deontay Johnson, let's actually group these 2 players together because they're almost identical in terms of their build, their usage rates, their role on the offense. I mean, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, just similar from all of those sort of perspectives. And when it gets windy, their usage, which is across the middle, right? Short intermediate routes, all about agility over top end speed, like go routes, right? They're staying within 5 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Those are the perfect guys for a windy game, particularly for Mitch Trubisky. He deals with a little bit of arm strength issues. Jacoby Brissett just isn't that polished of a passer. He's definitely got the arm strength there, but I still expect him to probably struggle a little bit with the wind tonight. Both of those guys, I think that they're still viable. I just want to say that I don't think they're my favorite plays because you're still dealing with such a low-level offense on both sides, particularly with their passing attack, right? Cleveland rushing the ball is a top 5 team, right? We can't call them lackluster in that category, but through the air, it's not just a volume thing, both from the efficiency standpoint too. They deal with deficiencies. So I want to say that I like the plays, but I don't love them. I definitely want to make that clear too. Both quarterbacks are in pretty much the same boat. The one thing I'll say is that they're cheaper than they should be. $8,800 for Brissett, $8,600 for Mitch Trubisky is far too cheap. So I think that both of them should be in your player pool. The one thing I'll say here is that at the captain slot, they can get there. It's just I expect the running backs to get there a little bit more. So a majority of my captain ownership, just to be fully transparent here, again, some of it's blacked out. If you want all of my projections, ownership, all of that, that is on my Patreon page. A majority of my captain exposure is going to be to these top two running backs, right? In a stack, either in the Browns or the Steelers direction, taking one of those two running backs to spearhead that sort of stack. You can see Kareem Hunt is another player, yet again, another running back, right, that I'm using at the captain slot. That's the sort of lineup that I'm envisioning and playing a game script for tonight to go out there and win all the money. If Mitch Trubisky ends up throwing 3 touchdowns, right, I'm not going to win the money tonight. If Jacoby Brissett goes out there and throws 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, I'm not going to win all the money tonight. But let's say that it's a Nick Chubb-led offense, a Najee Harris-led offense. They end up doing a lot of the work, posting that 20 to 25-point performance like I'm looking for. It could even be Amari Cooper or Deontay Johnson, right? I'd be okay with one of those two players getting it done too. Just, Jacoby Brissett and Mitch Trubisky kind of got to be an accessory option for me. So that's how I'm playing the slate, right? You got to pick your script. You got to pick your narrative and go with it. If you think you're going to cover all of the outcomes, even with 150 lineups, and again, I play 150 lineups and I'm telling you this, right? So if you think your 20 max is going to be enough to cover all of your outcomes, I'll just tell you that you're sorely mistaken. You can do it with 150. Hell, you can do it with 500 lineups and still not have enough combinations to cover nearly 20, 30% of the outcomes that you're looking for. You got to pick a script and go with it. You got to be aggressive when it comes to Showdown. And if you're right, you're going to get paid off in bunches. And if you're wrong, you're going to lose like you probably do most slates anyways. That's how Showdown works. It's volatile. When you hit, you want to hit big, not duplicate yourself with a ton of the field. And when you lose, you got to be okay with losing your hat sometimes in Showdown. That's just the name of the game. That's why when you're playing it, I always recommend going with a 10% mark in terms of your bankroll because it's just for a single game, right? There's going to be 3 primetime slates per week, right? So if you're taking 10% of your NFL bankroll and putting it towards each primetime game, that means at the end of the week, at a max, right, you've lost 30% of your total bankroll start at that week on primetime games. So that would be at a worst, right? You don't want that to happen. You want to be a lot closer to break even week to week if you can help it. But that's how you have to treat it. It's volatile. It's like Showdown with golf, right? You don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And by having that mindset, I think that's just important to take an aside here and note that mindset is almost more important to winning in DFS than the projections that you're using. A lot of the fundamentals you're using when you're making your lineups is having the perspective to understand that you have to make lineups that are aggressive enough to win it all. And frankly, be willing to lose money sometimes to go out there and win these large field contests. A lot of people are too short-sighted. They'll take one slate's results, take it to heart, right? Might lose their hat for one slate and say, you know what, I'm done with NFL DFS or done with Showdown, right? That sort of thing. If that's your mindset, you're probably going to lose in the short term. It's probably not even going to be a long-term thing for you because you'll probably end up flaming out of DFS in about a month. There's a lot of people that happens to, right? And honestly, they play a lot of the rake for us top tier players. So they have to be in the ecosystem. But if you want to be a sustainable player, right, you have to enter optimal lineups, which usually if you're only entering 20 or even 150 lineups, means you got to be aggressive about it, right? You got to go out there and you got to put your eggs into one basket or the other. And for me tonight, it's leaning on those rushers, right? There's 4 players, at least as of right now, that I have in my captain pool, and 3 of them are running backs. That gives you an idea of the sort of thing I'm going with. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on. Patrick says Bush and Jack duck blocks. That leads to big chunk plays running backs. That doesn't surprise me. Even last year without somebody like Miles Jack against the Baltimore Ravens, lit up a ton of rushing yards. Seattle Seahawks also lit up a ton of rushing yards. So it's kind of been their MO for a while now. And now that Miles Jack has been, as you said, kind of ducking some of those blocks, might even get worse. So I don't know, man. It might be pretty ugly tonight. I've been telling a lot of people I'm close to it that I think the Steelers are probably going to lose, but we'll see. Sometimes they surprise me. They surprised me week 1 against the Bengals. And honestly, I think going into it this year with that mindset as a Steeler fan, it's probably the way to go. Because if we go into it thinking we have a hope and then get crushed, like it's probably going to happen a lot of the time this year. Just me being realistic as a Steeler fan, I'm not going to have a good night, right? Whereas if I go into it assuming that we're going to get crushed, then we go out there and end up winning, going to be the happiest man alive. So that's my thought process there. And that's not good to hear about Bush and Jack, though. Carmi says, what do you feel about Pickens? We'll talk about him. I do like Pickens here. He should get a little bit more usage, particularly because, Mitch Trubisky has been criticized all week for not pushing the ball downfield. Pickens is that sort of wide receiver that thrives in downfield targets. He's got a big frame. He high points the ball extremely well. I expect him to get a few targets in this game, and if he can convert them at his cheap price tag, definitely has an avenue for success. Joaquin says, would you trade Michael Thomas, Garrett Wilson, and Hunt for Dalvin Cook? So 3 key players, 3 guys that could start for you for Dalvin Cook. I'd have to see the rest of your team, to be honest with you, Joaquin, and a 3-for-1 at this point. Now, the one thing I'll give you is that Garrett Wilson, you're getting the highest value you're going to possibly get for him at this point, right? So I get that. Kareem Hunt, I'd argue the same thing. He's gotten a lot of usage, a lot of red zone efficiency through the first few weeks. Michael Thomas has been okay to this point. It's a good sell high spot, but I have to see the rest of your team. I'd have to know what sort of running backs you have, whether it's a huge need for you, that sort of thing. That's what I have to say. Or Sharks say, in a 3-max, put one of the each running backs. That's up to you, man. I don't make your lineups for you, but it's something that I consider. I don't do a 3-max for Showdown. Finn says, how about your 10-man PPR? Okay, I'll read them. So you have Ertz, Eckler, Debo. Wow, that's a really good team. Okay, I like that, man. So there's 10 teams, so a little bit softer in terms of the drafting. But in PPR, yeah, you got to love it. I mean, not the strongest start from Eckler. We have to say that, right? I mean, DK Metcalf, maybe not the best start, but I like their upside. I think that they're better players than what they were drafted at. I took a lot of them this year. So I like it, man. Seems like a pretty solid team. Graham says, have you ever captained a defense or kicker before? Tonight might be the night. I have. Usually doesn't work out for me. Usually when I don't play the defense or kicker at captain is when they're optimal. Just in terms of slates, I can remember where the defense was optimal. Bills Patriots last year. I don't think it was the winning lineup in terms of the captain, but it was the optimal captain. The winning lineup for the Largeville GPP had Josh Allen at captain. So sometimes there's a difference between the optimal and the actual winning lineup, like with who they use at captain and so on and so forth. That was an example of it. The Cowboys, I forget who they played, but they scored like 26 points on defense. They were not only the optimal captain, but also the winning GPP captain. So it happened in that game. It then happened one other time last year. So in 3 of the 50 or so primetime slates, we had 3 instances where a defense was the optimal captain, and at least to my memory, 0 where the kicker was captain. So that's just the 2021 season. If you look at 2020, you could probably get a little bit more data, 2019, so on and so forth. But it's a crapshoot. It was easy to predict in one of the circumstances. When it was that Bills-Patriots game, it was an absolute slog out there. People kind of expected it to be, a lower scoring game, a lot of turnovers, a lot of fumbles because of how wet it was. But not a lot of people played him at captain, right? So, tonight seems like a smash spot for the defenses, and I'm going to have them, right? Again, it's not like I'm not going to play the defenses, but I don't know if I'm going to play him at captain. I don't know if I'm going to take it that far because I think people might just be a little bit reactionary. Because more often than not, we kind of overestimate that. I think we overproject the defenses, the situation a little bit. And I mean, even if it's like a 24 to 10 point game, that defense that only allows 10 points, they're still going to have to put up sacks. They're still going to have to get a turnover or 2 to get to that optimal lineup. It's just not a byproduct of the points allowed. So I think it's okay, Graham. I'm not going to be getting there myself. It's just a little bit rare in DFS, and it's really hard to predict. Most times when it happens, it's like 2 defensive touchdowns, like what you had for the Cowboys game. And it's again, impossible to see that coming. Joaquin says, Burrow, CD, Mike Williams. So you are a little bit, we'll say shallow, right? I want to use the right word for it, shallow at running back. So you have Jonathan Taylor there. Ramondre Stevenson I'd like, but he's really not somebody that you can rely on every single week. I don't hate the idea. You seem pretty deep at the positions that you're trading away. You're getting the most value that you can on a Garrett Wilson. I like it. Joaquin, you can offer that trade to that guy, see if they accept it. But I think it's relatively fair. Cam says, will it be a crosswind or is it with and against? I cannot tell you that. I have no idea, man. I not going to bring it up on the map and really try and figure it out. Even if it's a crosswind, I mean, crosswind would be worst case scenario, right, then every single throw, every single kick is going to be affected. But even if it's downwind or into, if you're playing this single quarter showdown slate, which I think they have at some points, they have those little flash slates that they do on DraftKings where you can like draft 3 or 4 players and it's like almost like a prop sort of thing out there. You can do those contests and try and take advantage of that. But in any circumstance, it's going to make it more difficult to play an offense. So, and honestly, I can't tell you. And I'm not gonna BS you pretending like I know. Yeah, 30 to 40 miles an hour of wind gusts. So it's like 20, 25 miles an hour sustained, which is bad enough. If it was a golf course, these guys would be getting absolutely murdered out there. But yeah, like 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts. Speaking of golf, I have to check on how the USA team is doing because if you guys didn't know, this is mostly a golf channel here, and the President's Cup is going on, and the US is absolutely kicking ass. They're now up 4-1 for anybody that hasn't seen. And Tony Finau and Max Homa clutched it up on hole number 18. You absolutely love to see it. Just a great start for the U.S. there. And I have 2 lineups in the first place of the GPP for the President's Cup. So I can't complain. I did it last week for Live. I had 2 lineups in the first place of the GPP after the first day. And now we've done it once again for this week. So I can't. Hey, I have to say, and we ended up doing really well for Lived last week, so hopefully we can continue that momentum. Carmi says, you've got Claypool and Pickens tonight rolling with Mitch and Chubb. So it's a little bit more of a passing attack for the Steelers. I think you're getting good value because they're really cheap, but based on the wind, based on just how inefficient Trubisky's been to this point, I don't know if I'm going to be there myself. It's going to be a little bit more of the running backs for myself. Yeah, you'll love to see it. 4-1 USA. Just a great start for us US fellas over here. Chad says, I have a mix of 10 lineups heavy on the defense and run game. Sounds a lot like what I'm running with. So good to see there, Chad. And Carmi says, Luke, you've won me money in golf lately. Nothing huge, but not losing. Hey, if you're winning money and you're getting entertainment out of your DFS experience, sounds like a win to me, right? That's a lot of people are coming out here losing, spending money on it as entertainment. If you're winning money, even if it's just a few dollars here and there, right? I know I do, not to toot my own horn, relatively large bets, right? So when I win, it can be pretty notable money out there when I post my tickets. Hey, even if you're just winning $5 to $10 on slates, that's ROI. You can build it up. You can build a bankroll up over the next few years, and it matters. And if you're having fun, that's even more better. So we've talked about a lot of the top end options. Talked about both of the quarterbacks, Kareem Hunt here as well. Let's get into this value range. So we'll touch on a lot of these players in this 4K range, 5K range. So Chase Claypool, I know he was just mentioned there by Carmi. I don't hate the play because he can just break off that 70 to 80 yard touchdown. He's going to get usage on the jet sweeps, which we've seen with Matt Canada's offense. They love just getting the ball into Chase Claypool's hands, regardless if it's a reception, a rushing attempt, so on and so forth. So in the red zone, he's got a lot more touchdown equity than, let's say, even a Deontay Johnson, who's the clear number 1 wide receiver. But in the red zone, that kind of defers to a Chase Claypool. Pat Freiermuth is also going to get a lot of targets in the red zone, but Chase Claypool is the guy that I'd have my eye on the most. So I don't hate the play. He's only $6,200. So I'm definitely going to mix him in. I'm not going to be like stacking him with Mitch, right? If it ends up being a one-off touchdown, or let's say it ends up being a jet sweep that he takes in for a touchdown, which would be sweet tonight. That'd be like the perfect scenario for me. Very well could get into the optimal. David Njoku's also a red zone threat. He's not playing that much between the 2 red stakes. So, from 20 to 20, he's not getting that much usage. A lot of that is going to Harrison Bryant. But when they've gotten into the red zone, it's been a lot of usage for David Njoku. So when he's only $5,200, if he were to score a touchdown, post maybe 2 to 3 catches, that is his route to the optimal lineup. A guy I love, though, is George Pickens, my guy at $4,800. I got to play George Pickens. I mean, the hype around him coming out of camp, I watched the preseason games, right? So I was able to see firsthand what the hype was all about. This kid is an absolute stud. He, first off, just punks defenders. When he goes out there and run blocks, he's pancaked, I believe, 3 people in the preseason. And again, preseason, right? He was going against second-team defenses at certain points, but he's still pancaking mofos out there, going out there just laying them out. I mean, you got to love that. He's kind of like Juju. He used to do that for us there with the Steelers, and also Hines Ward, right? He used to absolutely pancake defenders. But more than that, he's high-pointing footballs, one-handing catches. He's leaving people in the dust, breaking their ankles on their routes. I mean, literally looks like a superstar wide receiver. And to this point, has gone like no usage. So something's got to change. And like they're going after Mitch Trubisky right now. They're going after Matt Canada for having all of these short passes, little dump offs and whatnot. They're going to change it up. And I mentioned it to begin. He could very well get like 6-7 downfield targets. And based on just how good I think he is, I mean, that could very well be 10, 15 points right there. So I love him there at $4,800. I have him just 17.3% owned. So I'm probably going to play at least 50%. I'm going to get a ton of leverage on a George Pickens. And there's not a ton of expensive players that I'm jamming in, right? Like I'm trying to take the running backs where I can. They're really my priorities. The quarterbacks aren't even that expensive, so you could still fit them into lineups. If you take, somebody like a George Pickens down here, maybe mix in one or two of these defenders or the kickers down here, you could just make a lineup that way, right? You don't have to go down to a $400 Demetric Felton. You don't have to take David Bell at $1,400. You don't have to take backup running back Jalen Warren at $3,200, backup tight end Zach Gentry, so on and so forth. You can still take respectable median projections up here, right, with the kickers and defenses. And based on how low scoring we expect this game to be, they could still end up in the optimal lineup. So you're not only getting a solid floor by getting to these four players that I have here, the Steelers, Cade York, Chris Boswell, and the Browns defense, but you also have the upside to go out there and get that ceiling performance. So I know people mentioned before about potentially going to the captain slot. I just don't know if I can do that. I think that's a little bit too bullish. If it ends up happening, so be it. I'm going to get beat by that. Again, it happened in 3 of like the 50 plus primetime slates last year. So it happened like 7-8% of the time. I'm playing for like the 92, 93rd percentile type of performance, right? What's going to happen a lot more often than not. So those are my thoughts on the defenses there. Mid-tier range, I love it. Love Pickens, love Njoku. Have my eye on Chase Claypool and a few lineups down there too. I'll touch on the absolute just bottom of the barrel here. And I said I'd wait till 6:30, but we're getting close enough. Poured out a little bit more bourbon here. Obviously, game tonight for the Steelers. We're going to be a little bit festive about it. And this is the same Kentucky Owl it is as we had yesterday. So I liked it. Had to go ahead and run it back. It's definitely a little bit more tangy than I'm used to. It's got some bite to it. I'll say that. I got some water here too. Because that shit's got some bite. That's for damn sure. Let's catch up on chat, see what we've got going on. Carmi says, exactly, in your great entertainment. Well, that's great to hear. I think I'm a little bit boring, a little bit more analytical. It's just kind of how I am. But if you think I'm entertaining, that's great. Love to hear it. Eric says Trubisky might be used to the wind. Yeah, he played up there with the Bills. I mean, Chicago, infamously windy up there. I like it. I'm playing him tonight. I'm not going to have him at the captain slot, but hey, it's a narrative that might end up being a thing. And again, I'm a Steeler fan. I'd love to see it. I just don't know don't know if it's going to happen. Does Trubisky run with the ball tonight? You'd love to see it, right? He showed it during the preseason. He had a few rushes there that were especially impressive, particularly on third downs where he had to make something happen. We're playing from behind this chains. We're 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, those sort of situations. You'd love to see it because that would really boost his floor when it comes to his projected points. But we didn't see it in week 1 and week 2. So I would love to see it. I just don't know if we can count on it. We haven't seen it to this point. So I hope so, Eric. And like I said, I hope he's used to the win too. That'd also be great. So you're like the most positive, the most like optimistic Steeler fan I think that I've seen. And I love it. That's what you'd love to see. Patrick says, go Steelers. We're going to have to do it with some smoke and mirrors until Watt comes back. The one thing I'll say that people are kind of forgetting about is Flores. That defensive coach that we got from the Dolphins, one of the best head coaches, I thought, in all of the league. We get him there on the defense. He'll be able to use Minka to an absolute perfection. We have Devin Bush, Miles Jack. I mean, they're going to be able to take care of it. I think the Steelers defense is still going to be pretty decent. We need the offense. What I'm worried about is the damn offense. We got to get Pickett in there. If they get him in there sooner rather than later, they'll do pretty well. Chad says he won 570 last week. Let's repeat that or more. Love to see it. Yeah, last week with DFS, I did horrible on the main slate. Like if I would have just taken my own advice and played the Dolphins stack that I told everyone on my Patreon to play, told everyone on my Discord to play it, I told everyone on stream to play it last week, and then I didn't play it there with Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. I would have done that, probably wouldn't have won a shit ton last week on the main slate. But yeah, one across 2 of the 3 primetime slates. So I'm glad you did pretty good last week. Hopefully I can do well this week. I got to learn to take my advice a little bit more, right? I told everyone to play those stacks. And then when I went to actually build my set of 150 lineups, I was like, ooh, but I really like these Derek Carr stacks, which if you guys, obviously know how last week went, he didn't really have the sort of game that we were looking for, right? Those 40 points from Tua, like 40, nearly 50 points from Tyreek Hill and Tua, and Jalen Waddle were the absolute nuts. So lesson learned. When I give people advice, I should probably take it myself, right? You live and you learn, that's for sure. Let's pick up DraftKings now. We'll talk through a few lineups on there too. So let me go ahead. Oh, wrong tab. There we go. See, I had the PGA Tour stuff up there, which is pretty nice. Let's talk through a few lineups together. So what we're going to do here is talk through kind of the thought process. I'm going through and building and hand building a GPP specific lineup. So let's assume this is in the big $20 GPP or $15, whatever they're running for tonight. And you're trying to beat a good 20 to 100,000 other people, right? So a pure MME kind of contest where you're not just entering one lineup, right? So this is going to be more of a portfolio approach. This wouldn't be for a single entry. This wouldn't be for a 2 or 3 max sort of tournament. Pure upside, pure going to win the nuts there in first place. So for me at captain, I love taking both of these running backs. I mentioned Kareem Hunt as a potential running back, and I just want to start with Hunt here because if we start with him as our captain, it really dictates the rest of our lineup. With Kareem Hunt at captain, we're assuming that he gets the touchdown usage, right? He gets the red zone touches. He vultures touchdowns away from Nick Chubb, and I don't think it's impossible for both Hunt and Chubb to end up in the optimal. If you're playing a 2 to 3 max, a single entry, I would hate doing this. I wouldn't mix them together. But because we're building this for that super large field contest, again, 20 to 100,000 other entries, this might be a good way to make our lineup unique because doing so uses a good chunk of our salary. And if we're assuming that the Browns are just going to control this game, especially with both running backs getting a lot of run, maybe you take the Browns defense, right? You really start to stack that side. Another player that would really benefit there that you could try and take in this sort of lineup, you could take their kicker if you wanted to, assume that it's just a lot of yardage with the running backs, maybe not so much passing production. That's why you can fade somebody like Jacoby Brissett. You could take Amari Cooper, right? Try and lock in some points. But what I'm going to do is try and take a little bit of a buyback stack. So I'm going to take Trubisky, assuming that they're playing from behind. You can take Trubisky and the Browns defense together, by the way, because, even if he's throwing interceptions, that'll give points for the Browns. If he's throwing more, he's more prone to throw interceptions, especially if he's playing from behind. So more likely to feed that defense. But even if he throws 2-3 picks and still gets us like 13 to 14 fantasy points, because we're dealing with a 38 total game, that might be enough to get into the optimal build, or at least the GPP winning build, which is by far the more relevant thing for what we're discussing here. So I'm still okay with Trubisky. I love the idea of taking him and putting him with Pickens, who, if they're playing from behind and they need to throw it downfield, I think he might be the most talented guy in the Steelers to get that job done. And that leaves us at $9,400. And I mentioned Amari Cooper before as like a perfect guy to try and fit into this lineup. Why not go ahead and take him there, right? So you could take Deontay Johnson if you wanted to, make it a true stack, go Trubisky, Pickens, and then Deontay Johnson, or you could go to Amari Cooper there. I think that either of those builds would make sense for a large field GPP. If you could take the Deontay Johnson route, you do complete a stack. You also leave a little bit of salary on the table, which might make this a little bit more unique. But given the fact that we took Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb together, I don't know if we need to worry about it all that much. So you might be able to take all of these guys together. You might dupe yourself with like 2 to 3 other people in that large field GPP, but this isn't going to be like a 100 or a 200 lineup sort of train. If we're in a single entry, 2 to 3 max kind of event, I just want to highlight the differences here, the sort of changes in my thought process that I'd be thinking through. So rather than going with Kareem Hunt, I'm going to be a little bit more reasonable here and just take Nick Chubb at the captain slot. We're also going to go ahead and kind of stack up the Browns side. So I'm going to take that Browns defense once again. We can also go ahead and take the Browns kicker. Actually, we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to take the Browns defense and we're going to take the Steelers kicker. So what we're assuming here is that the Browns are able to keep a lot of points off the board because they're making the Steelers kick field goals. That's more than reasonable, right? There's some correlation between those two right there. So that's a game script that's more than viable there. So let's start there. Let's go ahead and perhaps add in Najee Harris. Let's go with this being a low-scoring game. That's why perhaps the Browns defense is getting there as well. There's $7,200 remaining. Let's go ahead. Let's put Mitch Trubisky in there. And for our last man in, and we could really go with anything that we wanted to here. And again, with Mitch Trubisky, we're just hoping that he gets to like 12, 13 points. This is a low-scoring game. We're playing him against the defense once again. So don't assume that because we're playing Trubisky, we're hoping for him to get 20 points, because that's not really the case. I mean, if he puts up 13 points, that's probably more than Freiermuth, and unless he scores a touchdown, it's for sure going to be more points per dollar than what you're getting out of Deontay Johnson or Amari Cooper, unless they score a touchdown. And even if they do, right, you're getting 4 points for Trubisky at the touchdown and 2 points for them. Unless it's truly like 70 yards and a touchdown for Trubisky and like 30 yards and a touchdown for one of these players, he's going to outscore them. And he's cheaper, right? So unless you're going for the stack, maybe you try and prioritize these quarterbacks. So that's what I'm thinking there. We have Najee Harris. You could very well throw it to Harris a few times. So I don't hate the correlation. And to round off the stack, I don't hate Njoku. I don't hate Donovan Peoples-Jones. I'm going to take Donovan Peoples-Jones here just because I think that Njoku's a little bit touchdown dependent. And because we don't have another number one wide receiver here, maybe let's try and take a guy who can eat up some of those targets. So I do like Donovan Peoples-Jones and that sort of lineup in a 2 to 3 max or a single entry sort of build. Let's see what we've got. We're also going to bring up prize picks here too. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We'll bring up prize picks and then we'll go ahead and head over there and I'll take a look at a few props. There we go. Alrighty, let me share my screen once again. And we'll catch up on chat before we do so too. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and toss them down below and I will get to them here. So let's see what we've got. Big Tech says, man, I know how you feel about thinking your team is going to lose. Maybe the same thing happened for you last week happens again tonight. I hope so, man. Like, I think that's the best mentality to have. Just go into it with no expectations. If you're surprised, you're surprised. JG says, if this game is really going to be this low scoring, we got to find touchdowns. Who's going to get them? I think running backs, very likely to get those touchdowns, or tight ends, right? So Njoku, I like Pat Freiermuth. Looking at red zone targets like a Chase Claypool, he could get carries in the red zone. And then we talked about Njoku already. I guess Amari Cooper, right? Because he's so shifty in the red zone, he can get a lot of separation. It really narrows your targets, right? You're not looking at taking like second string tight ends. You're not looking at taking a lot of fourth string wide receivers, that sort of thing. You really got to look at the guys that are going to be on the field, because in 5 to 10 snaps, you're not likely to get that touchdown. So yeah, I agree with you there. It's going to be all about getting that usage. Eric says running back. I tend to agree. He said you were in first place in a single entry showdown for a while on Monday. Then Goddard caught a few passes. Yeah, you still got great profit. Yeah, so I did pretty decent on the Monday night slate. Nowhere near the first place though. So glad to hear that, man. That's pretty solid. Let's talk through this prize pick slate. So the main prop that I have so far at this point is, what is it? What's his name? Nick Chubb. It was under 84.5 though. So it's at 82.5 now. I took the under. I believe the sportsbook line is at 84.5 and it's even money. So I don't know if I love it at 82.5, but still, obviously, if I took it at 84.5, I'd probably still take it at 82.5. You're talking about, chump change when it comes to the projection change. A few other props. The interception over for Mitch Trubisky, I'm going to play every single week that he's the starting quarterback for the Steelers, because he's absolute dog shit. Taking a look at the rushing touchdowns prop, Nick Chubb, I take the under on that too. I think that Kareem Hunt, first off, could steal that rushing touchdown. And Nick Chubb, he's going to post a decent amount of rushing touchdowns, but when he's in the game in the red zone, what you have to understand is that the defense pretty much knows that it's a run, right? Nick Chubb is by far the worst of the two passing blockers between him and Kareem Hunt. And he's also not the surest hands at the backfield. So when Kareem Hunt's in the game, it could be a run because, sure, he's still a pretty damn good running back, but he's also way better at those other two things. So when they use Kareem Hunt from a game theory perspective, it opens up the whole playbook to not only the offense, but to the defensive coordinator. They have to account both for running and passing plays. When Nick Chubb is in there, the Steelers are just going to pack the box and not let him score a touchdown. So it's more of a gut feeling play than anything, but I'm taking the under on it. The Steelers should know how to play Nick Chubb at this point, and they have. In fact, if you take a look at his rushing prop, he's only gone over in 2 of his 7 games against the Steelers. So in 5 out of the 7, he's gone under. So that's why I like the under there. And I also like the under on the touchdown prop. And receiving yards, like the over on George Pickens. So George Pickens, they have at 28.5 receiving yards. I had the over on that one. So those are the 4 props that I had my eye on here for Prize Picks. But that is all I've got for the live stream. Let's see what we've got. Eric says, how do you think ownership will count tonight? Chubb might be 80%, might be like 60% total. So I think he's going to be like 40, 45% at the flex, maybe like 20, 25% at most at captain, probably closer to like 15%. You don't see captains that are super mega chalky. The most owned captain that you're going to see is like 27, 28%. And that's usually Lamar Jackson. When Lamar Jackson is on a low scoring slate against a really lackluster team, he gets like 30% ownership at captain. Chubb tonight, probably going to be like 20, 25%. So he'll be chalky. He'll be owned at the flex spot too, but 80% might be a little bit bullish. He'll definitely be super chalky though, for sure. That is all I've got though, boys. Best of luck with all of your lineups tonight. Before you go on to get out of here, go ahead and smash that like button. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you go ahead and do so too, so you don't miss any of the content in the future. We'll have main slate content dropping tomorrow, touching on my top stacks, also my top value plays for week 3 DFS. So that'll be for the main slate on DraftKings. Make sure to keep an eye out for those 2 videos, and also a live stream tomorrow evening that is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So today we went live at 6 p.m. It's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. We'll be touching on every single game for week 3. So going through all the injury situations, all of the stacks that we can potentially get to, any live questions that you have, and overall just getting prepared here for Sunday. So a lot to talk about, a lot of content coming your way. Again, best of luck with all of your lineups, and I'll catch you guys next time.